Welcome back to the Diary of a CMO, the podcast where I sit with CMOs and thought leaders in marketing and related media, tech, and creative industries. We'll talk about how they got to where they are, strategies and life lessons we can learn from them to help build a career, business, and ultimately a life that we love. I hope you enjoy, and please subscribe. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Diary of a CMO. Like I always say, we're trying to build a global platform with an African essence. And today I'm really excited because we are spreading wings wider across the continent by having an amazing person. I haven't met her in person up until connecting on this podcast. I have read of her on multiple lists about leading women in marketing and communications, whether in East African region or across the African continent, point blank. And I'm so honored to have her on the call. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself very shortly, but it's my honor and my privilege to have on the podcast today someone that is considered a leading woman in marketing and communications, a business leader, as a matter of fact. She's an experienced marketing director. She's showed a lot of competence and excellence and success in consumer goods industry. She's been described as a very passionate leader. She's got a fantastic track record with building very strong marketing teams. She's skilled in business strategy and management. She's also one of the leading experts when it comes to integrated marketing, and she's been said to have a very strong commercial backbone. She's also described as a brave marketer. She's a self-proclaimed brave marketer, and we're going to talk about that on the podcast today. It's my pleasure to have on the call Zizwe Vundla. Did I get that right?
You got it perfectly right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on as well. As I said just now, I've admired you from afar in terms of just seeing the quality of work and the quality of brands that you have had the privilege to work on, and the kind of success and that you have brought to those brands. So it's the feeling is definitely mutual. I'd argue is more skewed to my side in terms of being excited. Yeah. So for those who are meeting you for the first time, Zizwe, how would you like to introduce yourself?
So to everyone who's watching and is meeting me for the first time, I am Zizwe Awuor Vundla. So half Kenyan, half South African. I like to call myself a proud African woman. Every day I thank God that I was born on this continent and that I'm African. So that's something I hold really close to me. So everything I do, whether in work or play, ultimately I'm wanting to make my continent proud. I'm wanting to do better for my continent. And I'm wanting to do better by African women and girls. So I always say that my purpose is around, like at the end of the day, when you get to those gates of heaven and God is asking you, what did you do? I'd like to say that in a small way, I contributed to elevating African women and girls so that they were more joyful, more fulfilled, more brave. That's what I want. What else about me? I am a daughter. I'm a sister, I'm a niece, I'm an auntie, a very good auntie. Everyone loves me as the auntie. And I'm a friend, I take great pride in the friendships I've built over the years, and consider my friends family. So, that's how I would describe myself. And, through all of that, someone who's really passionate about her work. So even with the long hours, one of my friends is actually visiting from South Africa this week, and she was like, Zizwe, you work so hard. And I was like, yeah, because I love what I do. I really love what I do, and I feel I'm making a difference. So the sleepless nights are worth it.
Amazing. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's such a blessing, to be honest, to love what you do that much, whether you are having sleepless nights or having to do it every other hour, it doesn't matter. That's incredible. Can I ask a question about the purpose? Like, where is that from? What do you think that stems from? This purpose when it comes to women and girls and uplifting, empowering, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So I think it's two things. So I grew up in a Pan-African family. So my dad, actually the reason I'm half South African, half Kenyan is that my dad was in the political struggle in South Africa and had to leave because of apartheid. And that's how he came up to Kenya, right? And so I guess because of that history, I've always been very Pan-African about the rights of Africans and all of that, right? And I have a history of that. My grandma, my dad's mom actually marched. There's a famous women's march in South Africa where the women marched on Pretoria, again, fighting for their rights. So it's in my DNA, this activist, this Pan-Africanist DNA. And then, so that's I would say the African part. And then on the flip side, I was also raised, in Kenya. I was raised in quite a matriarchal society. I had an amazing grandma who, in fact, for my great grandmother, like in my lineage, I have people women who've consistently broken barriers. So surrounded by very strong women, whether it was my grandma, my mom, my aunties. And so it's never, sometimes people talk about being a woman as, being a hindrance or a burden. I never saw it that way. I saw it as a strength. And I think the African and the woman, when they come together, I think it's a killer combination, which is why I say, honestly, when I wake up every morning, I'm so thankful that this is where I was born, right? I don't think it could get any better than this. So, having said that, I also realized that there was a lot of privilege in how I grew up, right? And I could see that, other African women and girls didn't have my opportunities, right? So, I mean, you can't just sit around and let that be. You just can't. I mean, I think when you come onto this planet, you have to do better. And for me, that doing better is we all rise. So, and since obviously women are generally left behind, for me, it's very important to me that I help elevate them, because a society where, men and women are not equally placed it doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve anyone. Yeah.
I agree. It's really exciting for me. I've had the honor or the privilege to talk to leading women like yourself on the continent. One of the one I remember right now is the one with Ku Governor. That's the Publicis CEO,
I know
and
Ku.
and she spoke so passionately about mentorship and leadership for women.
Yes.
Using her success and her platform as a platform for other women to thrive and all of that stuff. So I'm really excited. I think that with more women like you and and other women I've had the opportunity to speak with, I think that the future for the African woman is beautiful.
I think so.
I honestly believe that.
I think so. And for me, I always like to, because also you have to think about where's your sphere of influence, right? And I like to think that my sphere of influence is in corporate, right? Because obviously that's where I grew up. That's where I feel at home, and that's where I've experienced what it is to be a woman in corporate, climbing the corporate ladders and the things that you face, right? So I would even hone it in. I'm very passionate about women in corporate, because I went through some things and I learned some things. So I'm always very eager to pass on my learnings. I always say that the greatest gift I can be as a mentor is to be vulnerable, because what I've found is that there's this trope of the strong African woman, we just grin and we bear it, and I think it does such a disservice, because when women who are beneath you look up, they think it's an easy ride, that Zizwe just got to this level easy peasy, right? But when I'm vulnerable about the things that I went through, the things that didn't make sense, the times I may have cried in the bathroom, all that stuff, then the person is like, oh, okay, I'm okay. I'm not crazy. I'm not weaker. I'm not, it's, part of the journey, but obviously we hope that we make the journey easier.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful with the mindset in terms of, using your journey or your pain or whatever it is you had to deal with as some type of purpose, right? It's like taking that pain and making it become purpose. I think that's a beautiful mindset. When you're talking about tears now, I also remember talking to Dawn Rowlands, that's Dentsu SSA CEO, and she talked about how, there was a season where she said that she actually cried for months or something like that, and but yet when she came to work, she had to really show up
brave face.
Exactly. So, but I'm also very happy that these women, including yourself, are vulnerable enough to want to talk about it. You
mm.
know, it's the same thing with men. Like, in terms of, strong men don't
True
cry.
that.
That
True
like that
that.
that that, that type of stuff.
Actually, you're
So,
right. Especially
um,
African men. I agree. Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm,
But to be honest with you, I'm grateful that
mm.
with time and over the years and in recent times, these sort of I think they have, what do you call them? I think it's false truths are being debunked. You get
Yes,
what I mean? I
yes.
am so comfortable with bawling my eyes out with
Good,
my wife.
good,
Like I
good.
like, bro, I
Yeah,
don't. Do you get
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
And
no,
I
it's
think,
good.
yeah, so I mean, we can go on about this conversation, because it's a very
Yeah.
interesting one, and
Mm,
if we're talking about Africa, which is what this podcast aims to represent, these conversations are definitely very important.
mm.
I had a similar conversation with Ntabi, who is the
Mm-hmm.
uh, Group CMO Middle East
No.
and Africa, Penor, and it was the
Yeah.
same. It's the same thing. So
Mm,
I'm really really happy that these conversations are being had and
mm,
being had broadly on
mm,
platforms that is not just limited to the African continent but the rest of the world. So
mm,
thank you for embracing these truth and these purpose and living by it
mm.
daily. Thank you
Yeah,
on
yeah,
behalf of every African woman,
yeah,
African girl, child.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying a very big
yeah.
thank you,
Yeah,
very
and
big thank
I hope it also inspires African men as much as,
you. Yeah,
because I hope we get to a place where everyone is inspired by African women, right? Not just the girls.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree.
Mm,
I agree. I
mm,
agree.
mm,
I also read somewhere, or I
mm.
watched somewhere where you mentioned that you're a travel junkie, and
Yes.
I'm not. I wanted to speak more about what you said on the back of that. What you said on the back
Okay.
of that was your goal is to visit. I think you said every African country before you even start to think about, because I can't remember how you said it, but you said it along the lines of why you haven't seen the whole of Africa. Like, why are you like you want to
Yeah.
see that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
tell me, I'm going to put you on the spot here, right?
Mm.
This part A of this question is not putting you on the
Ah,
spot. It's just a very
okay.
light-hearted question.
Uh-huh.
32 African countries. Is it still
Uh-huh.
32?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is. I've not done a good job in the last 2 years.
Okay, no
Yeah.
worries. That's
Yeah.
fine. I think that
Yeah.
32 is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm too ashamed to talk about the number of African countries I've been to
Yeah. Yeah.
versus countries outside of Africa. I'm too
Yeah.
ashamed to
Yeah.
admit it on this podcast. So I'm just going to move on from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The part B is the one where I want to put you on the spot. So which one? And please don't say South Africa and
Oh
don't say
man, oh
Kenya.
Kenya. Oh
Yeah,
man.
no, no, no. I can't. I'm not going to allow you to do that. Don't say South
Okay.
Africa and don't say Kenya.
Okay.
Which one
Okay.
is your favorite and why?
Ooh wee. Okay. You got me because I was going to say Kenya.
That would have been
So
a cop. I'm not going to let you do that.
okay, okay. So let's think. Um, can I give two?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll give two and I'll just say the reasons for both.
All right.
Oops, what did I do in my camera? The first one I would say is Ethiopia.
Hmm.
And the reason
Okay.
I say Ethiopia is that, I think the best parts of traveling, at least for me, okay, there's two things. The food must be good, and then the element of history, because I love history, right? And I think the history of Ethiopia is so fascinating. It like goes
Yeah.
back to the Bible,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I think there are
Yeah.
very few places that you can go where you can see that. It's such a rich history which has not been told. But when you're there, you understand why Ethiopians are so proud to be Ethiopian. Like, you get it, yeah? So I'll say Ethiopia as one.
Hmm.
And then I was going to say Uganda. So I'll say Uganda as my second one. And this one is not as deep as the Ethiopia one. It's just that I always have a very good time in Uganda. Like, Ugandans know how to throw a party, how to party, how to have a good time. I think
Interesting.
I've missed 3 flights in Uganda because someone said, let's just go
Oh
quick.
God.
Let's
Oh
just go
God.
quickly to this one
Oh
club. It will
God.
just be,
Oh
one drink,
God.
one song.
Oh
Next
God.
thing it's 6 a.m.
Oh
So,
God. Oh God.
so
I hope
yeah.
your HR at the time is watching to see why Zizwe missed a flight, and then they had to rebook another one. Yeah.
Hilarious. Yes. In fact, my
Yeah.
HR, she's actually, the HR at the time is Nigerian.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
If
So
you
yeah,
miss your
no,
flight
but
because of a party, a Nigerian will let it slide.
they would, eh? So I think I'm good. I think I'm good.
Interesting.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So currently, you are
Mm,
the director, brand and marketing for
mm,
Safaricom PLC.
mm.
Can you take us through sort of like your career journey, like how you
Okay.
started to how you got to where
Mm,
you are now?
okay. Yeah, I think it's been an exciting 20 years because I just realized this year I've been working for 20 years.
20 years. Wow.
Yeah, 20 years. I like to think I don't look like it, so that's good.
No, you
Um,
don't.
yeah. Um, I started off, so I went to the University of Cape Town and graduated from there, and then started with Procter& and Gamble P&G, which to me
Interesting.
is, when it comes to brand building, I think it's
Trust me.
tops.
Trust
It's
me. You're
tops.
preaching to the choir. You're
That's
preaching to
it,
the choir.
right? I don't think it
Yeah.
gets better than P&G, and that's
Mm.
where I learned, that's where I got my foundation. I was with P&G for 15 and a half years, or 15 years, but I always
Wow.
say that the experience I had at P&G was so varied. Yeah, because people always used to ask me, Zizwe, you're still with P&G, aren't you bored? I'm like, no, I'm not bored, right? So I started off in South Africa working on hair care. And an interesting thing, when I was still, this was very young in my career, right? And I'd always wanted to work in Kenya since that was where I was born and raised. And I always used to say at the end of every year when they were doing my when they look performance review, I used to
Performance. Yeah.
say, yeah, if the Kenya office ever opens up, I really go on to go work in Kenya. But this was a distributor, a small office. Anyway, in the third year of saying that, finally, Burkhard, who's now a very big boss at L'Oreal, and we still keep in touch, and he was my marketing director at the time. He says, Zizwe, that thing you've been saying about going to Kenya, are you serious about that thing? I say, yeah. He says, because we're finally opening up the Kenya office and we need to build up a team. Would you go? I was like, pack my
Wow.
bags, let's do this, right? So
Wow.
3 years into working, moved to Kenya to set up the Kenya office from a brand point of view. So hiring the team, building the brands. Goodness, I was a kid myself. I don't even know how I did that.
Interesting.
And was in Kenya for 3.5 years. But I always say it was some of the best part of my career because it was so entrepreneurial. Building brands from scratch. One of the highlights was, launching our laundry detergent called Ariel in a Unilever space and
Right.
finishing them. Like it was we did our thing.
Wow.
And coming from behind, it was like a David and Goliath story.
Interesting.
And again, very young team and that, and then based on the success, because it was a very it's actually what put Kenya on the map even globally for P&G. Was asked to move to the global office of P&G in Cincinnati to head up the laundry business for developing markets. Yeah,
Wow.
I was the
Wow.
first African woman to be taken to Cincinnati at P&G, and this is a huge company which had been around for like 175 years.
Wow.
And then that role expanded and I got developed markets under my belt as well. Based on that was successful, moved back to South Africa, rose through the ranks there, working on different brands, became associate director and commercial director, which is where the commercial element comes through.
Yeah.
And did that for a while. And then I got itchy feet. I was just like, I want to make sure that I'm just not good at selling detergent and Pampers and shampoo. I want to prove I can do something else.
Oh my
So I
goodness.
took a sabbatical and then I joined Diageo. And as marketing director there, where I was there for 3 years at, selling some amazing, Diageo has amazing brands too. So the Johnny Walkers
Yeah.
of the world, which is still a love brand for me. I love that brand so
Yeah.
much. And working on the brands there. And then I got itchy feet again, and I was like, okay, FMCG, now we've done this thing for 18 years. Like, I need to
Wow.
prove to myself that I can do something else. And here we are at Safaricom, where I've been for 2 very exciting years.
Wow.
Mm,
Wow. Amazing.
mm,
Amazing.
mm,
Wow.
mm.
13 years at P&G. Is that what you said, yeah?
15.
15 years. Wow. That's a long
Yeah,
time. That's a long
yeah,
time. I think
yeah.
that, I mean, to the point we're making about P&G, I mean, there's no doubt in terms of the role that company has played in terms of elevating marketing
Mm,
communications across the world,
mm, mm,
and particularly emerging markets, actually.
mm, mm.
I had the opportunity to do some work for them in the Nigerian market. This was
Mm,
2011, 2012,
mm,
2013.
mm.
And this was in the time where brands were just starting to, latch on to digital marketing.
Ah,
At least in the Nigerian market.
yeah.
So one of the responses, we were one of the first digital agencies in the market, and I
Uh,
remember that we would drive to the PNG office in
yeah,
Lagos here at the time,
yeah,
myself and my boss at the time, and
yeah.
we would literally
Uh,
be begging the
uh,
Nigerian team
uh.
for at the time it was just about $5,000, a
Mm.
$5,000 budget to execute on digital. And I'm only talking about this because it's interesting to see how things have
Things
now
have
sort of
evolved.
evolved. Exactly,
Mm,
but the role those companies play in terms of developing the market intellectually,
mm,
definitely,
mm,
definitely is very
mm,
notable.
mm,
I this thing with you being okay. I think before I go into the brave marketer conversation, because
mm,
I'm really looking forward to talking about that.
mm.
You have this thing for a word of the year. In 2018, one of your interviews I saw,
Yes,
you had
yes.
one where you said your word for the year was brave.
Yeah,
And it appears to me like since then, and I might be wrong with the timelines, it appears
yeah,
like that point was when you started probably thinking of yourself as a brave marketer. But tell me about this
yeah,
thing. First off,
yeah.
your word of the year for 2025. Do you have one?
I don't. I
You don't.
don't. I don't.
Okay.
That's terrible. And what date is it? Feb 19th. I don't.
Yeah.
But I think for me the bravery still stands
Right.
because I think especially with how the world is evolving and what it takes to
Yeah.
win with customers,
Yeah.
we can't afford to play safe.
Mm,
If you're playing safe, you're going to get left behind. And I think even more important than being left behind, you're not doing what's right for your customers, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think maybe how I show up as brave evolves through the years, but I'm always about doing that thing where people are like, yo, Zizwe, okay. Um, that's a bit out there, but they eventually come along. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think your point about bravery is
Mm,
definitely very, very important today. I was reading an article earlier today about how every brand now wants to be your cool friend type stuff.
mm,
Everybody wants
mm,
to sound the same. Everybody
mm,
wants to be the cool,
mm,
like that stuff. So I think
mm,
to your point about bravery, it takes a
mm,
certain level of bravery
mm,
to
mm.
still own who you are, regardless of what is
Yes,
public.
yes,
What's the word now? Popularly accepted,
yes, yes.
and without any sort of fear, compromise, or whatever. So I
Mm,
completely agree with that. So that's
mm.
where the brave marketer stems from.
That's it. That's it. And it's just, and what I realized even at the time is that all throughout my career, I had done brave things. I had done things which were um, not out of the norm where people are looking at me, and that was part of the success, right? So I think
Yeah,
it was just codifying it in my head to say, actually, Zizwe, the moments where you've had these peaks in your career, these peaks in your life, it was when you took a risk, yeah? So you
yeah.
need to be comfortable with doing more of that and bringing people on that journey, because I think maybe one of the things I've learned later on in my career is that it doesn't make sense if you're brave on your own,
Mm,
because these things you do as a collective, you have a team, you have stakeholders, so bringing them on that journey. So even though it's a little bit scary, they kind of see where your head is at in terms of where you're trying to go.
fantastic. I
Mm,
love the sound of that, and I also like the
mm,
idea of having this sort of because I feel like in today's world and how important personal brands have now become. being able to sort of codify your brand in that sort of brave marketer, I think I absolutely love it. I've seen something similar with Kenzie Nombada, that's Nedbank. Hers is brand maverick. I've seen a few like that, which is why it kind of
Yeah,
catches my attention when I see
yeah,
it on someone's
yeah,
profile.
yeah, yeah.
So let's get into our marketing domain proper right
Okay,
now. Yeah.
okay.
And let's quickly, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you most likely are a marketing person. So we're not about to geek out on something that you will not be able to follow along. But if by any chance you stumbled upon this podcast and you're not in the marketing communications industry, I apologize, because we're about to start geeking out right now.
Yeah.
One of the things that caught my attention about you is the conversation about your personal purpose, right? And how you've been able to articulate that very clearly. And I think one of the things I take away, apart from your target, which is women primarily, is also like your almost like your aim or your ambition for women is, and you just is happiness. You just want them to be happy, and
Yeah, yeah.
how you are able to do that within your profession, your corporate sector, and all of that stuff. Boom. But my question is about being purpose-led brands. Because I also think that, even with the work you're doing at Safaricom, I've seen you kind of talk about that here and there. And I wanted to ask you that how can brands be truly purpose-led? Because at the end of the day, brands are in business to make money, right? And I think that the temptation is to assume that if you are being purpose-led, you're not going to make money. But I'm not going to preempt you. But my question is, how can brands be truly purpose-led? And you can also share some
I
case
like
studies
that.
based on
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
doing at Safaricom as well.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that question. And just linking it back to the first thing you said in terms of my own purpose, one of the key reasons that I joined Safaricom was that our purposes aligned. Because if you think about what my purpose was, it's about, elevating or transforming the lives of African women and girls. What is the purpose of Safaricom? We stand for the transformation of lives. So everything that we do has to transform lives. So for me, it was a fit, right? And I always say
Got it.
that the best case is when your purpose and where you work align. Yeah. So now in terms of purpose-led, I think when it comes to purpose-led companies, I think Safaricom is honestly best in class. The companies I've worked for before, which are big companies, but I always say that I've never felt myself live the purpose of a company as much as I do at Safaricom, right? And there's a direct link with why we've become so big, why brands like Safaricom and M-PESA have become so big. Let me give an M-PESA example, right? Just to show it's not fluff. Why did M-PESA start off? M-PESA started off because we had a huge unbanked population in Kenya. Yeah, under 30%. Under 30% of Kenyans were unbanked. Yeah,
Right.
only if you had a job, you worked in the city, were you banked. Yeah. Everyone else, if you needed to transfer money, what used to happen, like let's say I'm working in the city, I would put money in an envelope, give it to someone on a bus who's going to Kisumu, they'll give my mom and all of that. But also the fact that you're unbanked means that there's so many things you're not open, you don't have access to,
Right.
you don't have
Right.
access to credit, to insurance and all of this
Right.
thing. So M-PESA started off with that simple purpose-led need, right? We're going to bank the unbanked. Right?
Got it.
Now, when you
Got it.
look at the banked population in Kenya, it's 87%. And this is because of M-PESA, right? One of the highest in the world. Yeah.
Wow.
So again, showing how from purpose, you are able to build a brand and a product and a service which has transformed lives, but we're also making money from it. Like M-PESA is a successful brand, right? And of course, it continues to evolve. So it's not just about payments. We're now offering insurance, micro insurance. We offer credit. We offer investment you can invest money now for less than 100 shillings. That's less than $1. Right? So it means, again, you're opening investment to people who would not have that opportunity before. Because if you go to a bank, they're wanting huge stacks of money to be able to invest. So for me, I don't think they're at cross purposes. I think that the instances where you may find that it's at cross purposes is where maybe when the company started, it didn't start with purpose. It went
Right.
in with a
Right.
commercial, or I'm going to
Right.
make a buck
Right.
out of this, and
Right.
then you're trying to
Right.
backtrack. And I see that, I mean, no shade, but I see that with a lot of tech companies where
Right.
they got into it, and then now they're trying to force fit the purpose, and it's a struggle, right? So yeah, so I think, I mean, for at Safaricom, honestly, across when we're thinking about innovation, when we're thinking, in fact, our innovation is driven by a need. What's the need and how we can transform lives. And then, of
Wow.
course, there's the work
Wow.
we do with our foundations. I mean, we give so much back to this country. I mean, over the years, $150 million to education, economic empowerment, and health. So we put our money where our mouth is. And honestly, it's one of the things I'm most proud about for working at Safaricom.
I think when you start off a business with a very clear purpose in mind, and I'm just kind of listening to you. I mean, the M-PESA
Mm,
case study, I mean,
mm,
it's a globally
mm,
acclaimed case
mm,
study in terms of what that
mm,
company and the brand has been able to achieve.
mm.
Um, it's that your purpose then also to a large extent start to influence product innovation, right?
Yes, it
Like,
does. Yes, it does.
it's that as you start to see, okay, how can I better serve this
That's
purpose?
it.
It
That's
it
it.
becomes clearer as you go along that, okay, we can
Yes,
actually do it, we can do it, we can do it.
yes,
So I
yes.
definitely see what you mean. I definitely
Mm,
see what you mean.
mm.
Um, Safaricom's Investors Forum, um, I think that you made a very bold claim. This is me trying to be dramatic. Don't mind me. You made a statement along the lines of your vision for a future-proof Safaricom brand. You
Yes.
have a vision for a future-proof Safaricom brand.
Mm.
If I may ask, and if you are at liberty to share,
Mm.
what is this vision and how do you plan to accomplish this?
Okay, so look, I think so first of all, what are from a vision point of view, we want to be Africa's leading purpose-led technology company. So that's the goal. That's where we're trying to get to as the Safaricom Group. Yeah. Um, Obviously, and there are a number of there are a number of levers we pull in order to get there. Yeah.
Got it.
When I think about it from a brand building point of view, um, this is how I would look at it. So first, we remain rooted in the customer. Yeah, the
Okay.
customer has always been our guiding light, like we've just
Okay.
spoken, and we remain
Yeah.
rooted in the customer. What are the things that we may shift? How we engage with customers, how we get the insights from customers, but the customer remains boss.
Right.
The second one is that we're going to continue to innovate for growth. And that will be the guiding light. The third one is that we're going to leverage our massive portfolio. So we have a really strong portfolio across the various tech verticals that we will continue to drive. And lastly, it's around compelling storytelling and engagement. So for me, those are the pillars from a brand building point of view. And I always like to start off with that because I think when people think about marketing and brand building, they think about ads. Yeah. Brand building is not ads. That is just
Yeah.
one part of it, right? Brand building starts with, do you have the right product, the right service? Are you innovating continuously to make sure that that product and service is relevant, right? And then, of course, if you have a portfolio, how are you leveraging that for integration again, just to bring the power of the brand to the people. So the comms is the last part. It's like the cherry on the top. It's
Yeah.
the fun part,
Yeah.
but it's the cherry on the top. So I'd say that I would say that's the base for me from a blueprint point of view. Now,
Okay.
you could argue that those things would apply all the time. It's not
Regardless.
necessarily if you're future proofed, right? But in
Yeah.
terms of being future proof, I would say four things that you will see us make shifts in, right? I think
Okay.
for one, we're going to amplify our social impact credentials even more than we have, right? If you think about, like if you think about Kenya, the median age of Kenyans is 19. So 75% of Kenyans are below the age of 35. We are a youthful country. Yeah.
Got it.
What we know trends globally, what they're saying about the youth is that social impact is actually a huge reason why they choose brands. Yeah. Now,
Right.
we've always done the social impact thing, but how are we amplifying it? How are we
Right.
telling the story of how we are digitizing Kenya? How are we telling the story of what we're doing to drive financial health in this country with M-PESA? How are we telling the stories around how we are building tech skills and all of that? How are we telling the story of all the impact we're doing with our foundations? So that's the first one. So really amplifying the social impact much more than we've done before.
Right.
The second one is tech has to be at the center, yeah, has to be at the forefront. And it seems like a obvious thing to say, but you also have to be very deliberate there. A key one there is how we're driving accessibility, because it's easy to say, yeah, tech has to be at the center, but when the penetration of 4G devices is below 50%, you're talking
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we
Yeah.
as Safaricom doing to put 4G handsets in people's hands, right? So making them affordable, accessible, so at least you have that device. And beyond that, if we're talking about AI, for example, what are we doing to
Yeah.
democratize AI? So it's not something for
Right.
the West or something for
Right.
China. It's
Right.
something for us so that we can leapfrog. So there's a lot of access to making tech accessible. And then, of course, there's a number of programs we have under that in terms of things that we're going to dial up, for example, ad tech and
Yeah.
entertainment and content hubs and all of that. The
Right.
third one is that the youth are at the center. And so in terms of our brand building, I know one of the more interesting conversations I had when I joined Safaricom was I remember I saw the brand persona when I joined, and it was an uncle. And I think it was something like the cool uncle. I know you mentioned something about being cool.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, why is it the uncle? Like, if we're a young nation, why is it the uncle? Why isn't it the person whose uncle? You know what I mean? Like the nephew or the
It's
niece. Like, why isn't it, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So what you're going
Yeah.
to, and so what it means is that our bullseye target has shifted to be much more youthful than it has been before. You're going to see it
Right.
show up in our product, what the products we're developing in terms of the comms, and we really want to be in culture, but in a genuine and an authentic way. So it's not like that creepy uncle at the party who's trying to be cool, right? It's genuine, it's relevant, and of course, in all of that, making sure that we're agile so we keep with the times. And then the last one, which I think I'm actually the most excited about, is what we're calling I like to say the future of marketing is community. So community driven marketing. If you think about the world right now, if I rewind back to when I started marketing, you could have one ad and you put it on TV and it worked across the board because we were all watching the same shows on the same TV stations at the same time, whatever. Now we've all broken up into communities, and of course, tech has been a huge driver of that. So I don't know if you love cars, you'll be maybe in an Audi group, and you're obsessed
Yeah.
with Audi, and your TikTok
Yeah.
is Audi and
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
how are we winning with communities is a big one for us, because it means we move from just building a customer base to building a fan base. So what me and my team always talk about is that we want to build a fandom. So like I'm obsessed with Beyonce. So that same obsession that I have for Beyonce, when the tickets drop, I'm there, I'm whatever. We want people to feel that way about Safaricom because we are so honed into the communities and what's important to them, that we win with them, right? So one of
Yeah.
the big things you're going to see us this year is really making a big play on the creative economy. So what are we doing to win with photographers? What are we doing to win with filmmakers? So these niche communities, but making sure
Yeah.
that we do that with across the board. So
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah.
so that's just some of the stuff
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of future
I think
proofing our brand.
that's a pseudo masterclass on
Mm,
building brands in 2025. I think when I'm doing the post production for this and I cut out that clip, I'm going to call
mm.
it,
Uh,
brand building masterclass for
yeah,
2025. I
yeah.
think there's two things I just wanted to kind of add to what you said already. It's the
Mm,
point you made about communities.
mm.
I like to say that as brands, we have to think communities over demographics. Think
Yes.
communities over demographics. So
Mm,
and because again, I mean, it's right there in front of us. Like that's the way to kind of approach this. So
mm, mm.
definitely. The other point as well is in terms of these different communities, as we start to try to work with them. I also like to say that, find something to stand behind and not something to stand next to. These
Ooh, I like
communities
that.
are these communities are not photo ops. Do you get what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
let's be
yeah,
seen as
yeah.
versus when you
Oh,
stand
yeah,
behind it to really push
yeah,
and
yeah,
drive the agenda
yeah,
for those
yeah,
communities. That the
yeah,
upside is a lot
yeah,
bigger.
yeah.
And I
It needs to be
always talk about.
authentic.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I always
yeah.
talk about the brand Jameson in the Nigerian market,
Mm,
how
mm,
that it came into a very competitive market when it comes to the
mm,
spirit category, heavily dominated by Hennessy at the time, and then Johnnie
mm,
Walker and a few
mm,
other brands. And then
mm,
Jameson comes in, spots this sort of alternative community, niche
mm,
community, you would say at the time,
mm, mm.
and literally stood behind that community, elevated that community to becoming a mainstream
I
community.
love
I,
it.
I dare say, I used to keep a goatee, and I've talked about
Mm,
this on the podcast before. I used to keep a goatee after Jameson built this alternative community with the other people within that community, and it became what it is. That is part of my influence to keeping a full beard.
Oh,
Like,
really?
I'm telling you, and I'm
Wow, I
just,
love it. I love
you know
it.
what I mean? So,
I love
and that's the
it.
role, and that's kind of to see how the
Mm,
influence sort of
mm,
happens when
mm,
brands really stand behind
mm,
these communities and these
mm,
ideals and really push them
I love it.
forward. Yeah.
Mm,
Let's talk about telco marketing. One of the questions
mm,
I wanted to ask you
mm,
was, um, and it's how do you manage or um, how do you manage the balance between
mm,
continuing to build this your brand, build the brand, and those occasional frustrations that come
mm,
with
mm,
telco
mm,
services, because I think
mm,
no matter how great the
mm,
network is, those
mm.
days will show up when some people somewhere in one corner of the
Yeah,
state or the
yeah,
country
yeah.
would have. So how do you continue to manage that balance between building that
Mm,
brand love consistently
mm,
and
mm,
managing all of those
mm,
negative sentiments that seem like
mm,
inevitably will show up from
mm,
time to time?
mm. That's a good question. I think that I don't think it's about balance. I just think you both apply. Like it's not a balancing act. You
Okay.
cannot build a brand if the product is not working, if the experience on your network is not good, if the experience with sending money is not good. So for me, that's the foundation, right? And I think it's any brand, right? When I was selling Ariel, it needed to wash the clothes. The stains needed to come out. I can't make a big fancy advert, talk and the product is not working. So I
Yeah.
think at the heart of it, we are always, and it's about also working very closely, with the tech teams, with the business units. So first of all, you know what's happening in that space, right? I
Right.
guess another tip I would say for marketers is that, and especially marketing, more recent marketing, is that we can sometimes be detached from the actual business. Marketers cannot be detached from the business, right? You're in service of the business, so you need to know what's happening on the business. So understanding first of all, what are we trying to achieve from a customer experience point of view when it comes to the products? Continually storytelling about that, because I think that's a huge part of storytelling and being the foundation of storytelling. So what we talk about, at least in telco, for example, is marketing the network, right? So that is
Right.
before you talk about anything else, before you talk about what we're doing with our sporting assets, what we're doing with our foundations, wada. Are you marketing the network? Because that's why when that fails, no one will care that you put, $40 million
Right.
or whatever
Right.
into the, no one cares, right? So for
Right.
me, I think the what I would say is that they work hand in hand. You can't build a brand without a proper product with proper experience. And that's something I know as Safaricom, we're constantly working on to ensure that people have the best possible experience. It's very good already, but of course we're always optimizing and making sure that we get that right, and then storytelling about it.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Mm,
I think that when it comes to marketing telco brands or whatever.
Mm,
I think that the what's going to happen at some point is that the
mm,
network will be iffy in some location, right?
mm,
And then being able to manage that through the
mm,
entire process, I think is very,
mm,
very important. I
mm,
wanted to talk about one of the big telco brands on the African continent,
mm,
who recently increased the price of one of their data bundles. And um, in an attempt to speak to the frustration of the customer segment that was affected by this price increase,
mm.
they decided to publish a light-hearted, um, maybe like a light-hearted
Mm.
love letter, because I think it was published
Oh,
somewhere around Valentine's or just before Valentine's, and I'm not sure about
okay.
this.
Oh,
Um, and unfortunately, this telco brand got a bit of a backlash. Not a bit, to be honest. It got
they got a
serious backlash.
backlash. Mm,
Yeah, because
mm,
people had an issue with the tone of
mm,
this publication. They felt
mm,
like it didn't adequately capture the frustrations of the people.
mm,
It seemed like
mm,
it made light of something that
mm,
people felt very strongly about, especially
mm.
with the current realities of people
Economic,
within.
and that's it.
Exactly,
That's it,
exactly.
yeah.
So,
Mm,
so I guess this is me trying to get your take on how would you manage such a scenario? Because again,
oof.
price increases for brands sometimes are inevitable.
Mm,
In the Nigerian market, as an example,
mm,
I mean, price increases for consumer goods. It's
mm.
like,
Yeah,
as a
every
consumer, you
year.
can't even blame them because you kind of
Mm,
know why this is happening. Do you get what I mean?
mm, mm,
But as brand owners, how do you
mm,
manage those kinds of situations where the the customer is genuinely disgruntled
mm,
about the
mm,
service or a certain product or whatever, and
mm,
not just an isolated incident,
mm,
something. And because things happen, do you get what I mean? And
mm.
sometimes,
Yeah.
as a consumer, and as consumers, sometimes we don't care. The point is, I'm paying for this service. I expect to be served. Do you get what I mean?
Mm,
How
mm,
do you advise that brands navigate those times when, for whatever reason,
mm,
um, the customer is in their right to be frustrated about a certain service or a product? How would you advise brand owners to kind of navigate that, especially when it happens on a large scale? How would you advise? Just one or two
yeah.
tips on how you advise that they manage that.
Yeah. I think the first thing which came to mind when you were telling the story of the data going
Yeah,
up and
yeah, yeah.
was that for me, and I didn't see that case study, so I'll have to Google it afterwards.
Right.
But for me, it spoke of a business that was not in touch with their customer base
Interesting.
because the reality, like life is tough right now. Life is tough right now. People are struggling to make ends meet. So when someone is complaining about the price of data, you need to think
Hmm.
about it in the context of everything else. This person is trying to buy bread. This person is trying to buy milk. So when it's a bigger conversation. You need to, I guess, be in touch with the mood of the society. So in that instance, making a light-hearted joke of it for me is tone deaf, right? What could have happened is being more authentic and explaining why these things happen. Like we need to increase, because people are not stupid, yeah.
Yeah.
We need to speak to them like human beings. I always say just speak to
Right.
someone like a human being, right? The
Right.
reason,
Right.
transparency, in fact, that's what it is, transparency. The reason why we're doing this is XYZ, so explain
Right.
that, but
Right.
bring your product story into it. Yes, so that you're driving the value story. Because at the end of the day,
Right.
value is the story. So yes, it's 30% more, but it's uninterrupted. It doesn't
Right.
buffer. You can, and
Right.
then maybe that
Right.
impacts your life. Because of this, you can, you hand in your assignments on time. You can watch that
Right.
football match. So
Right.
you turn the story to the benefit in order to drive value, but um, 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 rooted in an understanding of the customer. And I think it
Right.
applies across
Right.
the board,
Right.
because I
Right.
remember in my past life as well, whenever we had to do price increases, right?
Mhm.
That was actually what we focused on. We focused on, because we knew we had to increase the price, oil
Yeah.
prices are up or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the excise duties are up. But what we would focus
Exactly.
on is telling what is the value you're getting from this product. Focus on that story, because then even if it's 2 shillings, 10 shillings more, I'm actually saying, okay, fine, it is more, but I'm getting so much more than competition or whatever for this money. So it's a
Right.
value
Right. Right.
story. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. It's a value story. I like that. I
Mm,
like that. It's a
mm,
value story. It's a value
mm,
story that's rooted in understanding the
mm.
customer's context in
That's
that
it.
sense.
That's it.
Got
That's
it.
it. Yeah.
Got it. One of the challenges, maybe not challenges, when I think about brands, especially with the way technology is growing in terms of adoption, I'm
Mm,
always curious about how, as brands, you are able to maintain what's the word I'm looking for? Relevance
mm,
between the urban and rural.
mm,
So
mm. Yeah.
because sometimes it's especially with if I look at telcos, for example, there's this
Mm,
shift.
mm.
I have a thing for reading financial statements. Nobody
Oh,
should
do
ask me
you?
questions. Yeah. So
Do
when
you
I
have a
read
finance
financial,
background?
I I I think okay, there's a huge backstory to that,
Oh,
and I
okay.
can spend another 10 minutes to that.
Okay,
Maybe
okay,
the next time I'm in Kenya or sometime
okay.
we can
Yeah.
talk about it.
Okay,
But
okay.
I have a thing for reading financial statements,
Mm,
and when I was of the financial statements of a lot of the telcos that I've read,
mm,
this conversation about digital services
mm,
continues to feature. Like it's
mm,
like it's
mm,
not obviously as big as other revenue streams like maybe
mm,
data or and the
mm,
rest of them, but it's
mm.
clear that there's a shift and there's a lot of focus on
Yes.
digital services.
Mm,
My question is that as brands make this shift to
mm,
more digital first and more tech first type of offerings,
mm,
how does marketing
mm,
maintain the balance when it's trying to communicate to people within the urban
mm.
areas who are more, who you could argue would better understand or better capture
Yeah,
what you're trying to,
yeah,
versus the
yeah.
rural? How do you manage that balance
So just so I understand, so is this in terms of how we target them, or I
how,
just want to make sure? Mm.
in the communication?
Oh, in the communication. Gotcha, gotcha,
Yes.
gotcha. Okay. That's an interesting one, yeah. Because for sure, to your point, even if you talk about access in the more rural areas, access to these phones and all it would not be as good as
Yeah.
in the urban
Yeah.
areas, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, and I think it's a balance, right? So
Yeah.
one, remember earlier I was talking about the fact that as a a tech company, we need to get
Right.
the devices into people's hands. So even from a strategy point of view, one of the key strategies we've called out as Safaricom is to get 4G device penetration to 99%. A lot of that driving of penetration is going to happen in the rural areas, because that's where the
Right.
phones are not there. Having said
Right.
that, that will take a while. It's not an
Of
overnight thing,
course.
even though we're
Of
quite
course.
aggressive there. So I think
Of
it's,
course.
I'll tell you what we're doing currently, right? So we segment our market, of course, and and we're very clear on our segments and our content and communication plans are segmented as well. So we know very well what an
Okay.
urban youth versus a rural youth versus what we call
Got it.
strivers, which is more mass and all of that, right?
Got it.
And so we
Got it.
actually have communication plans which are specifically targeted to that. So what you will see,
Interesting.
for example, is when I am doing a campaign for our youth platform called Safaricom Hook, it is 99% digital, because the people who are on that, they're living in Nairobi or Mombasa or Eldoret or Kisumu. They have the 4G devices. TikTok is their life. They get it. So you can do that.
Right.
But when I'm doing a campaign which is more rural, like one we just did over Christmas, we call Sambaza Furaha, which means spread the joy. We know that, first of all, they still want to engage face to face. You know, they want me to come to the markets and engage with them and entertain them. So that's what we do. Like with Sambaza Furaha, we went around the country for 35 days with this huge caravan, spreading joy, spreading delight, entertaining, and of course in the process, educating, because we knew about our products and the services, because that's what relates to them. It will shift over time. It will shift over time. So I think it's that balance and just making sure you're very clear on the best way to engage with a specific target and adjusting accordingly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Zizwe. As I start to round up, because I know I have to let you go, I asked for an hour. I'm pushing on an hour now.
That's fine.
So I want to talk to you about AI. And the reason I'm talking to you about this, you're already smiling. You know why? It's because I stumbled upon a very lengthy thread on LinkedIn sometime last year. And an influencer, I would call him an influencer because he is in his own rights. An influencer had posted some of your marketing materials and, and talked about the fact that, the creatives use generative AI, and so on and so forth. That was met with mixed reactions. Some people were pro, and I think some people were anti. I have my reasons why some people were anti, but this is not my fish to fry. It's that what is your view when it comes to generative AI and its applications in marketing? I don't need to ask you if you are for or against, because obviously you are for. But how do you plan on leveraging this further? Are there any lessons from or early executions in terms of using AI? What will be your recommendations to brands who are also looking to using generative AI in their marketing materials or advertising assets? And I think I would also like to get your take on your recommendations, not just for brands, but also for marketing services agencies, whether they are creative agencies or digital agencies, and how these generative AI technology can be better leveraged for the, lack of a better word, greater good of the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. I love this question.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Glad you do.
So I'm going to, I know what I always say is that AI is a tool. It's like a paintbrush, or how what do you call it? A photographer can have a camera, right?
Yeah.
Because the person who's holding the tool determines the output, whether the output is good, whether the output is bad, right? So what I will say is this. Actually, in the year where the drama about the post came about, earlier that year, we actually produced Africa's first AI-generated TV ad, right? You must check it. So Safaricom Chapadimba. I think it's a brilliant ad, right?
I think it is.
And no one talked about AI. No one mentioned the AI there, right? They enjoyed it. Whatever. No one mentioned the AI, right? But we used AI heavily, and I'll come back to that video. Now, like I said, we did this one, great. Everyone loved it. No pushback, whatever. And then there was this one post, which I will admit, it was not good. That's what I always say. It was not good. And that's why it looked the way it did. We did not use our tool correctly. But it's part of the learning process, right? So it was, as we learn, we see, oh, this one, okay, there we blundered. This one was whatever. And we learn and we go, right? But I'd like to focus more on when it works and why I'm so pro it, yeah? when we were doing this Chapadimba ad, this AI ad, because it's about how we have this sporting platform called Chapadimba Youth Football. So that's what the ad is about. Now, as part of the ad, we wanted to generate stadiums, yeah, because there's one final scene where there's a beautiful stadium and we have the players playing in the stadium. So when the people who are prompting, because we had an agency who are prompting to try, and they would put in, let's say, African Stadium. The pictures that were coming back were dusty fields, grassy, patchy, whatever, because the AI could not associate that an African stadium could be big, could be massive, could have floodlights. For them, it's Africa, so it's trash, right? And it's because, and this is why Africans really need to get onto this AI bandwagon, because if we don't, we're going to get left behind, and the biases of the people who are inputting are what's going to come out, right? So we need to put our head in there so that what AI is spitting out is reflective of the story we want to be told about Africa. So that's the first thing, right? And that's why I think I'm so passionate about us getting into it. The second one, when we did that ad, I remember I was like, we need to do an AI ad. And I remember our agency at the time was like, no, Zizwe, you can't do AI. Creatives hate AI. It's going to kill the industry. There was a lot of pushback. Let me tell you, when we finished that ad, the people who were promoting AI were the agency. I even stepped back. I said, yeah, you talk about it, because they saw what a powerful tool it was in their arsenal. Yeah. First of all, because there's elements of efficiency, we were able to do the TV ad in a much shorter time. You are able to do a lot of things which previously you would have needed green screens and all manner of things. And it allowed them time to now flex their creative muscle, because AI is nothing without the creator. That's what I always stress, and I continue to stress it. And I think we just need to play. We need to explore. Yeah. I think it's exciting. It's just a new tool that we get to play with. Who doesn't want new toys? Yeah.
I think that you have, as you said, it's a relatively new technology. Barring how quickly it's been adopted compared to other technological innovations, historically speaking. But it's a relatively new tech. So the expectations are we would get it right and we will get it wrong, and then we'll
Yes.
figure it out as we go
That's
along.
it. That's
I
it.
think that you have raised a very valid conversation, which is part of a bigger conversation when it comes to AI in general, in terms of training data, which is what informs these
Yeah.
outcomes or these
Yeah.
outputs.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot more work needs to be done in that area. Absolutely. Is that, for example, there's this AI platform that I think it is this person does not exist.com. And it's a platform where every time you refresh, it generates a new person, like realistic human looking, picture. And even if you refreshed a million times,
It would
it
be a
would
different
not,
person.
yeah, it would be a different person.
Wow.
And it would also, and it would, but what's more, concerning is that it will not generate a dark skin human.
No.
Yeah. Yes, I've used the tool. Maybe now it's different. At the time I used it, I just kept like I kept
Wow.
refreshing. Like, is there no black person on? Like, is it not going to generate any black person?
Wow.
So
Huh.
that's why I said the point you made earlier about training
Mm,
data is part of a bigger
mm,
conversation,
mm.
and how that affects the kind of narrative or the stories that we want to be told about the continent, whether
Yes.
within the continent or
Yes.
outside the continent.
Yes.
So it's definitely a big one, and I am glad that such a big brand as Safaricom and people like
Mm,
you, who are
mm,
marketing leaders, are business leaders, are mindful of these
mm,
things,
mm,
and just like you taking that bold step, oh, scratch that. Just like you taking that brave step to create a video, an AI ad. I guess would encourage other marketing leaders,
mm,
creative agencies, or brand owners, or any
mm,
kind of market, anyone in the space to continue to figure out ways to use this tech in the
Hmm.
most productive and, more
Way.
importantly, in the most meaningful
There
way.
you go. There you
I
go.
think that's the clarion call. One of my second to the last question I have for you
Mm.
is, um, what has been your biggest career challenge? Because to the point you were making earlier about vulnerability, I think it also helps the audience to kind of know, to some extent, what would you consider your biggest or your toughest challenge in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Wow. Okay. I always say that the toughest parts of a job are actually not the product or selling the product or the service part. It's usually around
Right.
people. It's usually around people, right?
Interesting.
So, and because human beings are involved and that, right? And I think because I'm so passionate about developing African talent, the moments when I have felt like my ability to progress African talent was put under risk for whatever reason, and we were not promoting the African talent, we're not promoting the Black talent, then I would lose it.
Wow.
I would
Wow.
lose it,
Wow.
right? So,
Wow.
yeah, I don't want to go into specifics, but I think you get the drift. It
Yeah.
was just generally because for
Yeah.
me, I'm just like, we have to pull people up. We have to pull African talent up, not just because it's African, because they deserve it. People are working hard. People are
Yeah.
are world class. You can compare us to anyone. And so when
Yeah.
for whatever reason you've put in place, the African talent is being stifled, then the other side of Zizwe, the one who boxes comes out, and
I
I'm
was
just
about
like,
to
oh
say
hell
you
no.
even I was about to say that even your stance right now is changing. Like you're about to have a fist fight.
Yeah, so I think those have been those moments when I felt I was fighting for people and maybe it was not being
Right.
appreciated, it was not moving as fast as I
Interesting.
would like. Those
Interesting.
have been the toughest. But and how
Okay.
did and I but I just I stick at it. I stick at it, and we're not going to I'm not going to let go. I'm with a dog with a bone because it's the right thing to do.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Mm,
Before I talk about one of the things I like to end the podcast with, which
mm,
is what would you say to 15-year-old Zizwe? Before I
mm,
talk about that,
mm,
I wanted to ask you, on a lighter note,
mm.
what is this thing with you and Beyonce? I'm just curious. What's you're part of the Beehive? Is that
Oh,
what
I'm
is are you? Oh
100%
my
card
goodness,
carrying
Zizwe,
member
Zizwe.
of the Beehive.
Oh my God.
I'm in there. I'm in there. So
Oh
yes. You're
boy.
looking at a proud Beehive member who already
Wow.
has her tickets to the Cowboy Carter tour, has already
Wow.
put in her leave.
Wow.
So yes, yes.
Wow.
No, yeah. So
Wow.
but I think, I think, Beyonce is, I mean, beyond the music, which I love, and all,
Absolutely.
and just her, which I love. I think she is the epitome of a purposeful brand. Let's come back to what we were chatting about earlier, right? Because, um, strong brands have a strong point of difference that they amplify consistently over time so that when you think of that brand, that's what you think of, right? And whether you love Beyonce or you don't love Beyonce, what you can say about Beyonce is that from the beginning of her career, she has stood for Black people and she has stood for women. And every single thing that she does, how she makes her decisions, whether it's, I remember there was a time when she had an all-female band that had never been done before, right? Her guitarists, her drummers, everyone was all female. Whether it's the lyrics to the songs, whether it's the charities she's supporting, women. And more
Yeah.
recently, you've seen that skew towards the Black diaspora, right? whether it's the work on her Lion King work,
Right.
and the music when she did the
Right.
album with all the
Yeah.
African artists,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
how she's supporting, now recently with the LA fires, she's
Yeah.
supporting black hairstylists and the black communities that were burnt down. She's promoting,
Right.
she's bringing back, when like the whole Cowboy Carter album is reminding people that actually country music has black roots. She's consistent. She's a
Wow.
purposeful brand who has
Wow.
amazing concerts and
Wow.
amazing music. So it's a
Wow.
win-win. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't I can't believe I just walked myself right into this. The last 2 minutes or 3 minutes of fanning out
Yes.
on Beyonce.
Yeah.
Um, as we start to wrap this up, your name is Zizwe,
Yes.
and I think I heard you say that the meaning is Mother of Nations.
Nations. Yes. Yes.
That's a beautiful name.
It is. It is. It is.
That's
It
a
holds a lot of
beautiful name.
gravitas, and yeah, I always feel like I need to honor it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was my dad's elder sister's name, no Zizwe. She passed away when they were young, but also you found that it was given to a lot of kids who were born in, not a lot, it's actually quite a rare name, but kids who were
Mhm.
born in exile from two nations. So you find
Interesting.
like the other no Zizwes I know, well, bar my cousin who's also called no Zizwe, you'll find that they're half and half like me. But I
Interesting.
like to think about it in the context of my purpose and how, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about my purpose as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
bringing it to
yeah.
life, yeah. Mm,
Amazing, amazing.
mm,
I wish we
mm.
had more time to really talk about, you know, were you migrated with, okay, no, you were born in Kenya.
Yes, I was born and grew up in Kenya because my
Got
dad
it,
was in exile here, yeah.
got it, got it, got it.
And my mom is
I
Kenyan. Mm,
Fantastic. I would have
mm,
absolutely loved to
mm,
talk about, growing up in that type of,
mm,
with that type of influence. Do you get what I mean?
mm, mm,
Having a father who had to live through that time, and having a
mm,
mother who also had to live through certain times, and the
mm,
level of influence that had on you as a woman. But I
mm,
also think that, to what you were saying earlier about the purpose, all of that kind of fed
mm.
into the woman you have become and the woman that
Yeah.
you are becoming.
For sure, for sure. I'm very lucky.
Fantastic.
I was born into a great family for which I'm very grateful for.
Amazing. Amazing.
Mm,
So my final question is,
mm.
what would you say to to 15-year-old Zizwe?
What would I say to 15-year-old Zizwe? Um, I would tell her because I think 15-year-old Zizwe was a go-getter. She was brave, she was outgoing. She was all of those things. And so what I would, and she's actually 15-year-old Zizwe as a lot like Zizwe me now because,
Right.
and I think it's more around the fearlessness. I think there was a
Got it.
point when, I don't know whether when you start working, when you start having doubts, that fearlessness is tempered
Uh,
down for whatever, because of life. So, and it's something that I had to relearn to be fearless. So I'll tell 15-year-old Zizwe, life will come at you, but you can't waste any minute being fearful. So don't waste those years or those moments being fearful. It will serve you. It will not serve you in any way. And the moments when you will thrive, when you will shine, when you will come out as the full Zizwe is when you're brave and when you're fearless.
wow. I mean, I couldn't have thought of a better way to close the podcast,
Hmm.
this episode. And why I think is really remarkable what you just said is because I remember I asked Kenzie the same
Hmm.
question,
Hmm.
and maybe with just a 1% variation,
Hmm.
she said exactly the same thing you said.
Really?
I
Oh,
promise
wow.
you. I'm
I
telling you.
clearly need
Like
to meet Kenzie. I clearly need
like
to, yeah.
I promise you, like it's almost identical. What
Interesting.
Because for her as well, she also at a much younger age, a lot of
Hmm.
bravery, a lot of fearlessness, a lot of
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
you did say, life comes at you, and
Hmm.
then can't, you tend to
Mm.
sort of let those things go.
Yes.
But in a similar fashion, she was also saying to our younger self, regardless of what life throws at you, don't
Mm.
lose that side of you.
That's it. I love
And
it.
I think that's a message we want to leave with every young African girl
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
out there, or African woman,
Mm.
regardless of
Mm.
what you're dealing with or what you've
Mm.
been through or what life throws
Mm.
at you.
Mm.
Um, do not lose your fearlessness. Do not lose your bravery. Do not
Yeah.
lose your ambition. It's old news that women cannot be ambitious.
Yeah.
Do not lose your ambition. On behalf of myself, thank you very much, Zizwe, for
Thank
joining me on this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I thoroughly did. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
This
Thank you
was
so
so
much.
much fun. Thank you so much for having me. The time flew.
It did. It's an hour,
Yeah.
15 minutes already.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Zizwe, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I definitely will be in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day too.
Absolutely. Thank you very much
Okay.
for listening, guys. If you're listening, thank you for watching, and see you at work.